The coffee mug stopped halfway to my lips. My wife stood in the kitchen doorway, arms crossed, chin lifted in that defiant way she'd perfected over the last few months. Her words hung in the air like smoke after a gunshot. "I'm sleeping with your best friend. If you can't handle it, divorce me." No tremor in her voice. No guilt in her eyes. Just cold, calculated honesty delivered like she was announcing dinner plans. I set the mug down carefully, watching the steam curl upward, buying myself 3 seconds to control my expression. "Which friend?" I asked, my voice steady. "Does it matter?" It did. But not for the reasons she thought. "How long?" 6 months. She examined her nails. "Bored already?" "Maybe 7. I stopped counting. 7 months. 7 months of late nights at the gym. 7 months of her phone angled away from me. 7 months of her picking fights over nothing, creating distance, building her exit strategy while I remained oblivious. I looked down at my hands. Let my shoulders slump. Let my breathing become shallow and visible. I'd watched enough movies to know what devastation looked like from the outside. "I need time to think," I whispered. She rolled her eyes. "Don't be dramatic. Either accept it or don't. I'm happy. Happier than I've been in years." The unspoken accusation hung between us. "Happier than you ever made me." "Who is it?" I asked again. "Ryan." Of course. Ryan with his easy smile and gym membership and divorce status. Ryan who'd been coming to our barbecues for 5 years. Ryan who I'd trusted with my spare house key when we went on vacation. The betrayal should have broken me. Maybe it would have, 3 years ago. But I'd built a business from nothing, navigated lawsuits, weathered economic downturns. I'd learned that the first person to show emotion in a negotiation usually loses. "I need a few days," I said, letting my voice crack slightly. "Whatever. Just don't expect me to pretend anymore." She grabbed her purse and headed for the door. "I'm staying at his place tonight." The door clicked shut. I sat motionless for 60 seconds, counting them in my head. Then I stood, walked to my home office, and locked the door behind me. My laptop hummed to life. I opened a fresh document and began typing everything she'd said, word for word, while it was fresh. Date. Time. Exact quotes. Then I opened my banking app. Our joint account showed a balance of $43,000, money we'd been saving for a down payment on a bigger house. Her individual account, which I had login access to because she'd asked me to help her set up automatic bill payments years ago, showed $68,000. Money from her inheritance, her bonuses, funds she'd claimed she was investing. I took screenshots of everything. Next, I accessed our credit card statements. The gym membership she'd been bragging about? That charge was real. But there were others. Hotel rooms downtown. Expensive restaurants I'd never been to. Lingerie stores. All in the last 7 months, just like she'd said. I documented each one. My phone buzzed. A text from Ryan, "Hey man, can we talk?" I stared at it. The audacity was almost impressive. I didn't respond. Instead, I called my attorney's personal cell. David picked up on the second ring. "I need to see you first thing tomorrow," I said. "And I need a recommendation for the best forensic accountant you know." "What's going on?" "My marriage just ended. And I'm going to make sure the exit costs her everything she didn't know she stood to lose." David was quiet for a moment. "Bring everything you have. And I mean everything. Texts, emails, bank statements, photos, receipts. We'll need to move fast." "I'll be there at 8. I hung up and returned to my computer. This wasn't about revenge. This was about justice. About making sure that betrayal had consequences. About ensuring that someone couldn't simply destroy a decade of partnership and walk away with half of everything I'd built. She wanted a divorce? She'd get one. Just not the one she was expecting. The next 3 weeks were an acting masterclass. I shuffled around the house in old sweatpants, leaving dishes in the sink, letting stubble grow on my face. When she bothered to come home, which was rare, I made sure she saw me staring blankly at the television, a half-empty whiskey bottle on the coffee table. "Are you going to wallow forever?" she asked one evening, annoyance sharp in her voice. I looked up slowly, making my eyes unfocused. I don't understand what I did wrong." She sighed dramatically. "It's not about you. I just fell out of love. It happens. With Ryan though. My best friend. Ex-best friend, I assume." She grabbed a water bottle from the fridge. "Look, the sooner you accept this, the sooner we can both move on. I'm willing to make the divorce easy. We'll split everything 50-50, sell the house, and be done with it." I nodded slowly, like I was considering it. "That seems fair." The relief on her face was almost comical. She'd expected a fight, lawyers, drama. Instead, she was getting a broken man who just wanted the pain to end. "Good. I'll have my lawyer draft something." She paused at the door. "And maybe lay off the drinking. It's not a good look." After she left, I poured the whiskey, really just colored water and apple juice, down the sink and opened my laptop. David had been busy. The forensic accountant's report sat in my encrypted email, 93 pages of financial archaeology. She'd been moving money for 8 months, longer than the affair had been going on. Small transfers to a separate account I'd never known existed. Cash withdrawals that she'd claimed were for groceries or shopping but were far too large. Credit card charges at jewelry stores where she'd allegedly bought gifts for me, gifts I'd never received. The total she'd siphoned off, almost $84,000. Better still, David's investigator had found the paper trail. Text messages between her and Ryan discussing their future together. Emails about apartments they'd looked at. Photos on her private Instagram account, the one she thought I didn't know about, showing them on weekend trips while she told me she was visiting her sister. Every lie documented. Every deception catalogued. But the crown jewel was something I'd found myself. The house we lived in had been purchased with my inheritance from my grandfather, with only my name on the deed. We'd married 2 years after I bought it. Under state law, that made it separate property, not marital property. She didn't know that. And her lawyer apparently hadn't thought to check. David scheduled the mediation for a Friday afternoon. "Don't show your cards too early," he advised. "Let her lawyer make the first move. Let them feel confident." I walked into that conference room looking exactly like what she expected, defeated, tired, ready to surrender. My clothes were rumpled. I hadn't shaved in days. I carried no briefcase, no documents, nothing to suggest I'd prepared. Her lawyer, a sharp woman in an expensive suit, barely glanced at me. My wife sat beside her, wearing the diamond earrings I'd bought her for our 5th anniversary. Ryan wasn't there, but I could see his influence, the new confidence in her posture, the hint of a smile. "Let's keep this simple," her lawyer began, sliding papers across the table. "We're proposing a straightforward division. The house will be sold, proceeds split equally. Joint accounts divided 50-50. Each party keeps their individual vehicles and personal property. No spousal support requested on either side." I picked up the papers with shaking hands, making a show of reading them slowly. "This seems okay." My wife's shoulders relaxed. "However," David said, opening his briefcase with a sharp click, "my client has some concerns about the accuracy of the financial disclosure." The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. David laid out the forensic report like he was dealing cards. Bank statements, screenshots, transaction histories, the secret account, the cash withdrawals, every single expense she'd hidden or lied about. "These transfers," David said calmly, "represent marital funds that were misappropriated without my client's knowledge or consent. We're estimating the total at approximately $84,000. Her lawyer's face went pale. My wife's mouth opened, then closed. "Furthermore," David continued, producing the property deed, "the marital home is actually my client's separate property, purchased prior to the marriage with inheritance funds. It's not subject to division." "That's not," my wife started. "It's documented," David interrupted smoothly. "Title search, purchase records, source of funds, all verified. The house remains solely in my client's name. The room was silent except for the humming of the air conditioner. Her lawyer cleared her throat. We'll need time to review these documents. Of course, David said. But there's one more thing. He placed a thick folder on the table. Even from across the room, I could see the photos clipped to the top page. My wife and Ryan, kissing outside a restaurant. Entering a hotel. Her private Instagram posts, celebrating their 6-month anniversary. Infidelity, David said quietly, affects certain aspects of property division and potential spousal support in this state. Just so everyone's aware of all the relevant factors. The mediation ended 20 minutes later with her lawyer requesting a continuance. My wife hadn't spoken after the photos came out, just stared at the table with her jaw clenched so tight I thought her teeth might crack. I maintained my defeated posture until I reached my car. Only then did I allow myself a small smile. David called that evening. They want to meet again Monday. Her lawyer sounded rattled. Good. They'll come back with a counteroffer. Probably try to claim she deserves something for contributions to the household during the marriage. What are our chances? With this documentation? 90% in your favor. The separate property angle on the house alone is bulletproof. The financial misconduct and infidelity just strengthen our position. He paused. What exactly do you want out of this? I'd been thinking about that question for 3 weeks. I want the house. I want full reimbursement of the money she hid, plus the money she spent on her affair from joint accounts. I want her car. Her car. It's titled in both our names, but I made every payment. It's worth $40,000. She can buy me out or surrender it. Aggressive. I like it. Anything else? Her retirement account contributions during the marriage. Half of whatever she put in. David whistled. You're going for blood.
No. Y correcte.
I'm going for what's fair. She wanted to leave? Fine. But she doesn't get to burn everything down and still walk away with the furniture. That weekend, she finally came home. I was in the kitchen when she walked in, and for the first time in months, she looked uncertain. We need to talk, she said. I poured coffee, didn't offer her any. Okay. You've been planning this. Not a question. An accusation. Planning what? The divorce? You're the one who demanded it. Don't play games. All those documents, the investigation, you've been building a case while pretending to be devastated. I took a sip of coffee. You told me you were sleeping with my best friend and said I should divorce you if I couldn't handle it. I handled it. Just not the way you expected. She slammed her hand on the counter. That money you're claiming I misappropriated, that was mine. My bonuses, my inheritance. Money that went into joint accounts becomes marital property. You know that. And money you spent on hotel rooms with your boyfriend? That was definitely marital property. So what? You're going to take everything? Leave me with nothing? I'm going to take what I'm entitled to. The house that I bought before we met. The money you stole and hid. Compensation for the assets you wasted on your affair. That's not everything. You still have your salary, your car if you buy out my interest, and whatever's left in your accounts after reimbursement. She laughed bitterly. My lawyer says we could fight this. Claim emotional distress, irreconcilable differences, argue that your performance shows deception. Your lawyer can try. But judges don't typically sympathize with people who commit adultery, hide money, and then act shocked when there are consequences. I loved Ryan. I still do. Congratulations. That has nothing to do with our financial settlement. She stared at me like she was seeing me for the first time. When did you become so cold? Probably around the time my wife told me she'd been sleeping with my best friend for 7 months and didn't care if I liked it or not. She left again that night. I heard through mutual friends, the few who hadn't picked sides yet, that she'd had a massive fight with Ryan. Apparently, he'd been under the impression that she'd be getting half of everything in the divorce, including the house. When she told him the truth about our financial situation, His enthusiasm had cooled considerably. Monday's mediation was brutal. Her lawyer came in fighting, arguing that my wife deserved compensation for homemaking contributions and career sacrifices. David systematically demolished each argument. Your client worked full-time throughout the marriage, he pointed out. She made approximately 80% of what my client made. There were no children, no career sacrifices. She had a housekeeper that my client paid for. They tried to claim the house should be marital property because we'd both maintained it. David produced receipts showing I'd paid for every repair, every upgrade, every property tax bill. They argued the money she'd moved was separate property management. David showed the court dates and account statements proving it had originated in joint accounts. By hour 3, her lawyer looked exhausted. "Let's talk settlement," she finally said. "My client is willing to surrender any claim to the house in exchange for keeping her vehicle and retirement accounts." David looked at me. I nodded. "Not enough," David said. "My client wants reimbursement for the $84,000 in misappropriated funds, plus $30,000 to cover half the joint funds spent on the affair. That's over $100,000. That's what was taken and wasted. My client is being generous by not pursuing additional damages." The negotiations went back and forth. Eventually, we settled. She kept her retirement account and her car, but owed me $95,000, payable from her individual accounts and, if necessary, a structured payment plan. I kept the house, the joint savings, and my retirement accounts. She signed the papers with shaking hands. The divorce finalized on a grey Tuesday morning. I signed the final papers in David's office while she signed hers remotely. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. The house felt larger that evening, emptier. She'd taken her clothes, her books, some furniture she'd brought into the marriage. Everything else stayed. I walked through the rooms, touching the walls I'd painted, the floors I'd refinished, claiming the space as entirely mine. My phone buzzed constantly. Mutual friends wanting the story, asking if the rumors were true, trying to maintain neutrality while clearly fishing for gossip. I ignored most of them. But one call I answered. "It's Ryan." I said nothing, just let the silence stretch. "I didn't know," he said finally. "About all of it. The money she took, I thought you two were just growing apart. You thought that while sleeping with my wife. She said you were getting divorced anyway. That it was basically over. And you believed her because it was convenient. Because it meant you could have what you wanted without guilt." He was quiet for a long moment. "We're done. Her and me. She's not the person I thought she was." "No," I agreed. "She's exactly the person she's always been. You just weren't paying attention to the parts that didn't benefit you."
I'm sorry.
"No, you're not. You're disappointed. There's a difference." I hung up. The truth was, I didn't feel the triumph I'd expected. The revenge fantasy, watching her realize what she'd lost, seeing the consequences catch up with her, had sustained me through weeks of pretending. But now, standing in my empty house with signed divorce papers, I just felt tired. My phone buzzed again. This time, a text from an unknown number. "You destroyed my life." I knew it was her, texting from a new number I hadn't blocked yet. "No," I typed back. "You destroyed your own life. I just made sure I wasn't buried in the rubble. I hope you're happy." I looked around my house. At the walls I'd chosen, the furniture I'd picked out, the life I'd built before she'd entered it. I thought about the $95,000 that would be transferred back into my accounts, the betrayal that had been documented and legally recognized, the best friend who'd proven himself worthless. "I'm not happy yet," I typed. "But I will be. That's the difference between us. I know how to build something from nothing. You only know how to take what someone else created." I blocked the number. Over the next few weeks, I learned the rest of the story through the grapevine. She'd moved in with Ryan initially, but that lasted less than a month. Without the prospect of my house and my money, their love had apparently lost its luster. She'd moved into a small apartment, downsized her car to afford the payment plan, and thrown herself into work. Some mutual friends whispered that I'd been too harsh, too calculated. Others said I'd done exactly what I should have. I stopped caring about either opinion. The house sold 3 months later. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to. Too many memories. Too much history. I found a modern condo downtown, all glass and clean lines, nothing that reminded me of the life I'd left behind. I was packing boxes when I found our wedding album, tucked in the back of a closet. I flipped through it slowly, looking at younger versions of ourselves. Her smile had been genuine then, or at least I believed it was. I'd been so sure we were building something permanent. The photo from our first dance caught my eye. We looked happy. Maybe we had been, once. Before resentment and boredom and whatever else had poisoned her heart. Before she decided that happiness with someone else was worth more than honesty with me. I closed the album and put it in the donation box. Some things weren't worth keeping, even as reminders. 6 months after the divorce finalized, I ran into her at a coffee shop downtown. She looked thinner, tired, her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail instead of the styled look she used to maintain. She saw me at the same moment I saw her, and for a second, we both froze. Then she walked over. "Hi," she said quietly. "Can we talk? Just for a minute?" I checked my watch more out of habit than necessity. "Sure." We sat at a corner table, both holding coffee we weren't drinking. "I owe you an apology," she started. "A real one." I waited. "What I did was cruel. The way I told you, the affair itself, taking the money, all of it. You didn't deserve that." She stared into her cup. I was unhappy, and instead of being honest about it, I burned everything down and tried to make it your fault. "Why now?" "Therapy. A lot of therapy. And realizing that I destroyed a good thing because I convinced myself the grass was greener." She smiled sadly. "Turns out, the grass isn't greener. It's just different grass with different problems." And Ryan was a fantasy. Someone who represented escape and excitement because I didn't see his bills or his bad days or his flaws. The moment real life started, so did the reality check. I nodded slowly. "I appreciate the apology. Genuinely. Do you forgive me?" I thought about that. About the weeks of pretending, the legal battles, the betrayal that had cut so deep I'd gone numb to protect myself. About the person I'd become in response, calculated, cold, strategic. "I don't know yet," I said honestly. "Maybe someday. But right now, I'm still figuring out who I am after all this." She nodded, unsurprised. "That's fair. For what it's worth, I hope you find happiness. Real happiness, not the kind I was chasing." "Same to you." We parted ways at the door. I watched her walk down the street, shoulders hunched against the autumn wind, and felt something release in my chest. Not forgiveness exactly, but maybe the beginning of letting go. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah, someone I'd met through work. She was smart, funny, refreshingly honest about what she wanted from life. We'd been on 3 dates, taking things slow, both of us carrying baggage from previous relationships. "Still on for dinner tonight?" her text read. "Absolutely," I typed back. I walked to my car, past the coffee shop where my marriage had just received its final eulogy, toward whatever came next. The calculated coldness that had served me during the divorce was thawing, replaced by something more uncertain but infinitely more real. The house was gone. The marriage was gone. The best friend who'd proven himself false was gone. Even the anger that had fueled my methodical dismantling of everything she'd tried to take from me had faded into something quieter. What remained was possibility. That evening, Sarah and I sat at a small Italian restaurant, sharing stories over wine and pasta. She'd been through her own divorce, understood the complexity of rebuilding trust, didn't expect me to be over everything just because the papers were signed. "My ex used to say I was too honest," she mentioned, twirling her fork through carbonara. "That I should be more tactful, less direct. And now I realize that honesty, even uncomfortable honesty, is the foundation of anything real. Tact is just a word people use when they want you to help them lie to themselves." I smiled. I think I'm learning that too. What happened with your marriage? She asked. You don't have to tell me if you're not ready. I considered deflecting, keeping the story simple and surface level. But something about her directness, her willingness to be vulnerable, made me want to be equally honest. She cheated with my best friend, told me to either accept it or divorce her, and tried to take half of everything I'd built before we met. I spent 3 weeks pretending to be broken while I documented everything, then made sure the divorce cost her more than she ever imagined. Sarah's eyebrows rose. Damn. Too much.
No.
Just. I'm impressed by the self-control that must have taken. Most people would have exploded. I almost did. But I'd learned something building my business. The person who loses their composure first usually loses everything else too. Do you regret how you handled it? I thought about my ex-wife in the coffee shop, about the apology she'd offered, about the life she was rebuilding from the consequences of her choices. No, I said finally. I regret that it happened. I regret that someone I loved could be that cruel. But I don't regret protecting myself or making sure there were real consequences for betrayal. Sarah reached across the table, squeezed my hand briefly. Good. You shouldn't. We talked until the restaurant began closing, about everything and nothing, building the fragile beginning of trust between two people who'd learned the hard way that trust was earned, not given. Driving home that night, I thought about beginnings and endings, about how sometimes they were the same thing. My marriage had ended in a lawyer's office with signatures and legal documents. But my life, the real life I wanted to build, the one based on honesty and earned trust and genuine connection, that was just beginning. The condo was dark when I arrived. I turned on lights, made tea, stood at the window looking out at the city lights. Somewhere out there, my ex-wife was probably doing the same thing, contemplating her own new beginning, learning her own hard lessons. I didn't wish her ill. I didn't wish her well. I simply wished her away from my thoughts, from my future, from the space she'd occupied for too long. My phone buzzed one last time. Sarah, thanks for dinner. And for trusting me with your story. Same time next week. It's a date, I replied. I finished my tea and went to bed, sleeping soundly in the home I'd chosen, building the life I wanted, finally free from the weight of betrayal and the exhausting performance of pretending not to care. Tomorrow, I'd wake up and keep building. Not in response to what I'd lost, but in pursuit of what I wanted to create. That was the real victory, not the divorce settlement or the documented revenge, but the reclamation of my own future. She'd thought I was broken. For 3 weeks, I'd let her believe it. But the truth was simpler and stronger. I'd just been calculating the cost of my freedom. And now, finally, I was free.